All of them, every single one, had their attention fixed on the lone figure at the center of the room, a human. She sat in a reinforced containment chair, her wrists locked in an energy-binding restraint that pulsed with a dull blue glow. The chains hummed with the promise of absolute security, designed to suppress even the most aggressive escape attempts. And yet, Jamie Johnson, the human in question, looked utterly unimpressed. She was slouched, legs crossed, fingers tapping against the metal armrest. A slow, rhythmic beat. Tap, tap, tap. Counselor Gerald, a towering reptilian with overlapping armored scales, let out a low, guttural hiss. Cease that infernal noise. Jamie stopped tapping. Then, after a beat, started again, this time with more enthusiasm. Oh, I'm sorry, is this annoying? She smirked. Wouldn't want to irritate the guy accusing me of intergalactic crimes. A wave of murmurs rippled through the assembled officials. Even those unfamiliar with human body language could tell she wasn't afraid. That fact alone made them uneasy. Counselor Larax, a lanky, insectoid being with 6 iridescent eyes, shifted uncomfortably. Human, he began, voice a buzzing rasp. You stand accused of no less than 39 violations of intergalactic law, including unlawful interference in sovereign planetary affairs, unauthorized technological subversion, and, he glanced at the hollow slate in his clawed hand, and high treason against the Grand Order of Zelther. Jamie tilted her head. That one's new. Don't even know what a Zelther is, but sure, why not? Let's add it to the list. Gerald's massive claws flexed against the tribunal's podium. You mocked this council, human. You were a fugitive for 7 years, evading capture across 6 systems. You hijacked government assets. You sowed chaos on civilized worlds. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You are an infestation. Jamie's smirk widened. You say infestation, I say girl with a healthy curiosity and a knack for problem solving. Tomato, tomato. A metallic chime echoed through the chamber as the presiding AI, a floating orb of crystalline energy, activated. Its voice was smooth, authoritative, and entirely devoid of emotion. The accused's prior record indicates an extensive history of high-level infiltration, data manipulation, and combat expertise, far exceeding projected human capability. This raises the question, who precisely is Jamie Johnson? That was the question, wasn't it? The council had expected a cornered criminal. Instead, they had this, an irreverent, unshaken human woman whose mere presence set their nerves on edge. She wasn't just defiant. She was comfortable, and that made her dangerous. Counselor Larax cleared his throat. There is a way to expedite these proceedings. The accused may provide full disclosure regarding her actions in exchange for leniency. It is the most rational path forward. Jamie rolled her eyes. Rational, huh? See, here's the thing. I have a strict policy against making deals with bureaucratic reptiles and nervous bugs. No offense. She shot a look at Larax. Actually, nah, full offense. Gerald's patience snapped. He slammed his clawed fist against the podium. You do not seem to grasp the gravity of your situation. Jamie arched her brow. Oh, I grasp it just fine. I just don't care. Silence. Heavy. Pressurized. Then the AI orb flickered. It was a subtle thing, a glitch no one else seemed to notice, but Jamie did. Her fingers twitched against her restraints, the smallest movement, a calculated test. The field around her wrists shuddered in response. Interesting. The AI's voice wavered, as though suddenly uncertain. It appears there is an issue retrieving the accused's full dossier. Several classified blocks have been detected. Access restricted. Gerald's head snapped toward the floating AI. Explain. The council's own security measures are preventing further decryption. Jamie's smirk turned razor-sharp. Well, that's awkward. Counselor Larax's mandibles twitched. Override it. The AI hesitated. That is inadvisable. Gerald bared his fangs. Do it. The chamber lights flickered. Every data console in the room blinked offline for exactly 3 seconds before rebooting. The alien delegates stiffened, their translators stuttering as their systems momentarily lost synchronization. Then, a harsh, jarring noise filled the chamber. The opening bars of Never Gonna Give You Up. Jamie's grin was predatory. Jerahol recoiled as the music played through every speaker. What is? It's called being rickrolled, Jamie supplied helpfully. The AI's usual monotone now carried an edge of what could only be described as existential dread. Full decryption has compromised Council security protocols. System intrusion detected. Larax clutched his head. What have you done? Me. Jamie blinked, all mock innocence. Nothing. I mean, all I did was let you poke at my records. Turns out you guys triggered some, let's call them contingency measures. The hollow displays flickered again, revealing scrambled code that moved too fast to process. It wasn't alien script. It was Earth-based encryption, human-made, impossible to break. Security breach, a guard barked. We're locked out. Jerahol turned to Jamie, fury and something dangerously close to fear crossing his scaled face. Who are you? Jamie leaned forward in her chair, the flickering lights casting sharp shadows across her features. You know, I was really hoping you'd ask that. The restraints binding her wrists powered down. Gasps. Shouts. The guards moved as one, scrambling to react. Too late. Jamie sprang to her feet, flipping forward over the tribunal desk. The nearest guard reached for his weapon. She grabbed his wrist, twisted, and sent him sprawling. Another lunged. She sidestepped, swept his legs out from under him, and sent him crashing into a console. Larax shrieked. Restrain her. The containment chair exploded. Energy pulses rippled outward as the security field collapsed, knocking the unprepared guards back. Jamie moved fast, seizing the nearest blaster from the unconscious guard's belt. Jerahol roared, claws slashing toward her, but Jamie ducked, pivoted, and jammed the blaster's barrel against his armored chest. Click. Silence. Her grin was effortless. Want to rethink that infestation comment? The chamber was in chaos, alarms wailing as the council scrambled. But Jamie didn't run, didn't flee. She simply straightened, rolled her shoulders, and blew an imaginary speck of dust from the blaster's barrel. Now, she said, stretching as though she hadn't just single-handedly dismantled the most powerful governing body's security forces. I think it's about time we had a little chat. The alarms blared through the tribunal chamber, a deafening wail of panic that sent ripples of chaos through the gathered delegates. It was a rare sight. Members of the Galactic Council, the highest governing body in the known universe, tripping over their own feet in terror. Bureaucrats scrambled behind their podiums, guards barked frantic orders, and somewhere in the fray, a panicked Larax was desperately trying to activate the emergency lockdown. Jamie Johnson stood amidst it all, perfectly still, her stolen blaster resting against the chest of the reptilian counselor Jerahol. His golden eyes burned with fury, but beneath it, buried deep, was something far more satisfying, fear. You will not leave the station, Jerahol snarled. Jamie tilted her head. Really? 'Cause I'm thinking I might. The blaster hummed in her grip. She didn't fire. She didn't need to. The tension alone was a loaded weapon, and she wielded it with the precision of a master. A trio of security officers charged from the left. Jamie moved before they did. She ducked under the first swipe, pivoted, and drove her elbow into the gut of the nearest guard. The second raised his rifle. She yanked Jerahol in front of her like a shield. The reptilian's own soldiers hesitated, unwilling to shoot through their superior. That was their mistake. Jamie twisted, slammed her knee into the back of Jerahol's, and sent him crashing to the ground. The moment he was down, she was moving again, fast. Her booted foot met the nearest guard's wrist, knocking his weapon from his grip. She caught it midair, flipped it into her hands, and fired. The stun blast hit the remaining officer square in the chest. He collapsed with a groan. You idiots. Jerahol roared. She's one human. Stop her. Jamie smirked as she tapped her stolen comm device. Hey Shibai, if you're still listening, now's the part where you do that thing. The station's lights flickered. Then, every door in the tribunal chamber slid open at once. Absolute chaos erupted. Guards poured into the room from all directions. But the sudden flood of panicked politicians tripping over one another made it impossible for them to fire without hitting their own. Jamie slipped into the crowd, weaving between frantic bureaucrats. She reached a control panel near the exit and slammed her fist against it, overriding the emergency lockdown. A sharp, artificial voice crackled to life over the intercom. Warning: unauthorized system breach detected. Security overrides engaged. Jamie grinned. Yeah, we'll see about that. 2 guards caught sight of her and charged. She grabbed a tray from the council's refreshments table, some gelatinous alien delicacy still quivering on its surface, and flung it into their faces. They recoiled with a disgusted yelp. She bolted through the exit, boots pounding against polished steel floors. Behind her, Larax's shrill voice screeched over the intercom. Close all exits. Do not let her reach a docking bay. Jamie sprinted down the corridor, heart hammering. She needed to get off this station. Now. Her hands flew over the wrist console she'd swiped earlier, fingers tapping rapidly. The stolen device pinged. A holographic map projected from its surface, marking out the station's docking bays. She skidded around a corner, nearly colliding with a pair of startled technicians. One of them, a wiry amphibian in a lab coat, barely had time to squeak before Jamie grabbed the tablet from his hands. Sorry, borrowing this. She glanced at the screen, scanning its security logs. Oof. Your encryption is just embarrassing. The tech reached for the tablet, but Jamie had already cracked the clearance codes. She shoved the device back into his hands and kept running. Thanks, buddy, she called over her shoulder. She was close now. The docking bay loomed ahead, its massive blast doors sealed shut. 3 armed guards stood in front of it, blasters raised. Jamie didn't slow. One of the guards fired. A bright pulse of energy rocketed toward her. At the last second, she dove into a slide, the blast sailing inches over her head. She rolled into a crouch, snapped up her stolen blaster, and fired back. 1 guard crumpled. The second stumbled, fumbling for his communicator. Jamie didn't give him a chance. She grabbed a nearby maintenance cart and shoved it straight into him. He yelped as he went down in a heap of tangled limbs. The 3rd guard had his weapon locked onto her. She sighed. Really, dude? He fired. Jamie twisted to the side, avoiding the shot by inches. Her foot lashed out, catching him in the knee. He buckled with a strangled grunt. Before he could recover, Jamie slammed the butt of her blaster into the back of his head. He went down hard. Jamie exhaled, flexing her fingers. That was exhausting. She tapped at the wrist console again, accessing the docking controls. The doors hissed open. The docking bay stretched before her, filled with sleek, polished ships, none of them hers. She needed something fast, small, and hopefully easy to steal. Then she saw it. A compact, 1-person scout vessel sat near the edge of the bay, its engines in standby mode. Someone had been preparing for takeoff. Perfect. She ran for it. Behind her, the sounds of approaching security forces echoed down the corridors. Jamie vaulted onto the ship's loading ramp and scrambled inside. The cockpit was tight, built for efficiency over comfort. She slid into the pilot's seat, fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls. The engines hummed to life. Outside, council enforcers poured into the docking bay. Blaster fire erupted. Sparks exploded against the ship's hull. Not today, boys, Jamie muttered. She gripped the throttle and slammed it forward. The ship lurched. The docking clamps resisted. Jamie cursed. She yanked at the controls again. The ship shuddered, its engines whining in protest. Come on, she growled. A fresh barrage of laser fire slammed into the ship's shields. Warnings flashed red across the dashboard. The clamps still held. Jamie's teeth clenched. She flicked through the ship's system files, searching for a manual override. Then she spotted something, an auxiliary thruster function. Not for standard use. But Jamie was never one for standard. She activated it. A sudden burst of energy surged through the ship, ripping it free from the clamps. The vessel lurched forward, blasting out of the docking bay just as another wave of guards rushed in. Jamie hooped, gripping the controls as the ship shot into open space. Behind her, The council station loomed, a massive structure of metal and glowing energy, its defense turrets already adjusting their aim. The comms crackled. Jerahol's voice came through, seething with fury. "Human, you cannot escape. Surrender now." Jamie leaned back in her seat, casually flicking a few switches. "Oh yeah? What are you gonna do? Bore me into submission with another angry speech?" The turrets locked on. Jamie's grin faltered. "Right. Guess that was the wrong answer." She yanked the controls, sending the ship into a sharp roll. The first barrage of plasma fire barely missed. She pushed the thrusters to full. The tiny vessel rocketed forward, dodging between the floating satellite drones surrounding the station. The automated turrets struggled to track her, firing shot after shot into empty space. One turret found its mark. A glancing hit. The ship's alarms blared. Jamie winced. Okay, I get it, you're mad." She swerved hard, aiming for the nearest asteroid field. The ship rattled from the force, but she held steady. The asteroids loomed ahead, a twisting maze of spinning debris. She dove in. The council's pursuing vessels hesitated. Jamie laughed. "Come on, boys, don't be shy." She weaved through the asteroid belt, her ship skimming dangerously close to jagged rock. The pursuers tried to follow. One clipped a floating boulder and spun out in a fiery explosion. Jamie exhaled. The remaining ships peeled off. She was free. She set a course for open space, letting the adrenaline settle. Then, as the last of the alarms quieted, she let herself smirk. They hadn't caught her. And if they'd gone through all this trouble to try, that meant they were scared. Good. They should be. The council chamber was in disarray. The aftermath of Jamie Johnson's escape left more than just physical wreckage. It left a question lingering in the air like the scent of burned circuits. Who was she? Jerahol loomed over the control panel, his claws flexing against the reinforced surface. His breathing was uneven, anger barely contained beneath layers of cold-blooded restraint. His golden eyes flicked between the fractured security footage and the error messages flashing red across the station's mainframe. Every classified file, every attempt to access her full dossier, had resulted in the same frustrating response: access denied. It wasn't just a security block. It was deliberate. Something far beyond their authority had sealed this woman's past, and that realization sent an uneasy ripple through the room. Counselor Lerax hunched over his own terminal, his 6 luminous eyes darting from screen to screen as his fingers skittered across the controls. The insectoid's mandibles clicked nervously. "We should not have pursued her," he murmured. "There's something unnatural about the way the system responds to her records." Jerahol growled. "Unnatural? No, Counselor. Designed. Someone, somewhere, wanted to erase her from existence. And we just made the mistake of digging." The floating AI orb flickered above them, its synthetic voice carrying an edge of hesitation. High-tier encryption protocols detected. Multiple artificial intelligence firewalls are self-generating upon each decryption attempt. This level of data concealment is unprecedented in Council history. Lerax hesitated before speaking. What if she isn't a criminal? Jerahol snapped his head toward him. What? What if she isn't some rogue element? What if she was something else? Lerax's voice had taken on an unfamiliar note, one not of authority, but of dread. What if we just arrested someone that even we were never meant to find? Silence. Then, against all protocol, against better judgment, Jerahol did something reckless. He issued an override command, bypassing every firewall, forcing the mainframe to obey a direct authority override. The station's lights flickered, the hum of its core shuddering as the system fought against itself. Warning prompts flooded every screen. Decryption in progress. The counselors held their breath. Decryption complete. A file emerged from the darkness of classified archives, its access logs showing that it hadn't been touched in over a decade. A single name flashed across the screen in bold, human standard text. Jamie Johnson, Project Final Stand. The silence was suffocating. Jerahol pressed forward, opening the file. As the contents unraveled before them, His cold-blooded nature did little to shield him from the ice crawling up his spine. Jamie Johnson wasn't just a fugitive. She was a weapon. The logs detailed an experimental human program, classified to the highest degree, buried so deep that not even the Galactic Council had clearance to it. Project Final Stand, a desperate last resort initiative, born from a war Earth had fought in the shadows, one the rest of the galaxy had never even realized was happening. Humans, unlike most sentient species, had no singular evolutionary advantage. No natural telepathy like the Zrel. No regenerative nanite biology like the Zelthari. No advanced psionic linkages like the Grell. What they had was something far worse. Adaptability, relentlessness, the terrifying ability to evolve under pressure. Jamie Johnson had been bred, trained, and engineered into something beyond human, an operative capable of infiltrating, dismantling, and outmaneuvering any force in existence. According to the records, she had been part of Earth's last line of defense against a now-extinct force that had attempted to invade centuries ahead of schedule. A force that had underestimated what a cornered species was willing to do to survive. She had been one of the few survivors. Then she had vanished. Her data logs were wiped, her identity erased. The project had been abandoned, its existence buried under layers of redacted reports. And now, a decade later, she had resurfaced. Larax trembled, his claws tapping erratically against the console. We arrested an Earth war strategist, a survivor of Final Stand. Jerahul exhaled sharply, his claws tightening into a fist. We arrested something worse than that, Counselor. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. We arrested a ghost. The moment the words left his mouth, an emergency beacon lit up across the chamber. Jamie Johnson was already making her next move. She hadn't just escaped the station, she had left them a message. The intercom crackled, overridden by a pre-recorded transmission. Wow, you guys really don't know when to quit, huh? Jamie's voice rang through the chamber, smooth and laced with amusement. I mean, props for finally cracking my file. But all you really did was confirm that you're way out of your depth. The council members bristled, their collective pride rankling under her taunting tone. But hey, no hard feelings, Jamie continued. I actually came here looking for you. Jerahul stiffened. His scales flattened against his skin. See, here's the thing, Jamie went on. I wasn't running. I was hunting. The holographic display in the chamber shifted, revealing a data stream that wasn't from their own system. It was a live feed. Coordinates. Movement tracking. Jamie had hijacked their own security network. She had been monitoring them the whole time. Jerahul's claws flexed. What in the void is she doing? She's looking for something, Larax whispered. And she needed our resources to do it. A new image flashed across the screen. A star system, uncharted, deep in the outer rim. Jamie's voice dropped its playful edge. I thought I was done with this fight. Turns out, it's not done with me. The hologram zoomed in, revealing something that made even Jerahul's battle-hardened heart falter. A fleet. Not just any fleet. A fleet bearing ancient war signatures, their energy readings eerily familiar. A race long thought dead. The ones Earth had destroyed at all costs. They were back. Jamie sighed, and for the first time, there was no humor in her voice. Just cold, grim certainty. You wanted to know who I am? Her voice turned sharp, like a blade cutting through the static. I'm the last person standing between you and the worst mistake of your lives. The transmission cut out. For a long moment, no one spoke. No one moved. Then Jerahul straightened, his jaw tightening. Summon the fleet. Larax gaped at him. Are you suggesting we help her? Jerahul turned, eyes burning with a realization he hadn't wanted to accept. I'm suggesting that if Jamie Johnson is afraid of something, he said, voice like crushed stone, then we should be terrified. The void of space crackled with impending violence. The enemy fleet, dark and ancient, emerged from the shadows of the outer rim, their war signatures pulsing like the heartbeat of something long thought extinct. Their vessels were unlike anything in the Galactic Council's database, jagged, angular behemoths that moved with eerie precision, their hulls humming with unreadable energy. They were silent predators, stalking through the abyss with a singular purpose: annihilation. Jamie Johnson stood on the bridge of the Council's flagship, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The gathered counselors and military leaders were frozen, transfixed by the sight before them. None of them had seen these ships before, but Jamie had, and she knew exactly what they were capable of. Jerahul tore his gaze away from the screen and turned to her, his scaled face unreadable. "Tell me we are not about to die." Jamie exhaled slowly. "Depends." Larax's mandibles clicked frantically. "Depends on what?" "On how quickly you all can take orders," she replied, stepping forward. The council officers bristled, unused to taking commands from anyone outside their chain of command, much less a human fugitive. But Jamie had no time for ego. "You want to live? You do exactly what I say." Jerahul narrowed his eyes. "You're assuming we take orders from you." Jamie pointed at the enemy fleet. "I don't assume. I know that if you don't, we all die screaming." The counselors fell silent. A transmission crackled to life. The enemy was hailing them. The voice that followed was not one meant for organic ears. It was a mechanical drone, layered over itself, a whisper and a roar all at once. "We have returned. Surrender your vessels. Surrender your worlds." The war was never over. Jamie stared at the screen, her fingers flexing at her sides. A cold dread curled in her gut, but she shoved it aside. This was what she was made for, what she had been left alive to finish. She turned sharply. "Larax, cut communications. We don't negotiate with something that doesn't understand the concept." The insectoid hesitated, then did as she ordered. The enemy ships began their advance. "All right, listen up," Jamie snapped. "These things don't fight like anyone you've dealt with before. They don't falter, they don't hesitate, and they sure as hell don't stop until there's nothing left. But they do have weaknesses." She moved toward the strategy console, hands flying over the interface, calling up battle projections. They operate on a neural-linked combat system. It's all one giant, shared intelligence. Think of them as a hive mind, but worse. The second you make a move, they'll counter it before you can blink. Jerahul frowned. "Then how do we fight them?" Jamie smirked. "We make sure they don't understand what we're doing." The fleet's alert systems wailed as the enemy ships opened fire. Jamie slammed the comms open. "All ships follow my lead." The battle erupted in an instant. The enemy's weapons tore through space, their energy blasts moving faster than anything the Council's forces had ever encountered. Ships exploded in the first wave of fire. Entire cruisers wiped from existence before they could so much as react. Jamie's fingers flew over the console. "Cut all predictable maneuvering. I want pilots flying like they've never flown before. Unorthodox movement patterns, no formations, make it impossible for them to calculate our next step." The fleet scrambled to obey, the rigid discipline of Council warfare dissolving into something erratic, unpredictable. Ships twisted and turned in seemingly nonsensical paths, juking between fire arcs and breaking all conventional rules of engagement. The enemy hesitated, just for a second. That was all Jamie needed. She grinned. "Gotcha." She activated a secondary command, an old trick from a war the rest of the galaxy had never known. A false data stream flooded into the enemy system, feeding them fabricated fleet positions, false targeting coordinates, and ghost signals that made it impossible to tell what was real. Their unified intelligence system faltered, and then the Council's fleet struck back. Weapons fire ripped through the void, slamming into the exposed weaknesses of the enemy ships. Explosions bloomed across the battlefield, sending wreckage spiraling. Jerahul exhaled sharply, watching as the tide began to turn. "How the hell do you know how to fight them?" Jamie didn't look away from the battle. "Because I did this before." A new alert flashed across the console. "Enemy reinforcements." Jamie swore under her breath. "They're adapting," she muttered. Larax's mandibles clicked. "Then we cannot win." Jamie's jaw tightened. "Not if we play by their rules." She took a breath, then turned. "I need control of the fleet's central AI system." Jerahul stared at her. That is not possible. It is if you want to win. She met his gaze, and for a moment, he saw something that made his cold-blooded heart seize. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. Jerahul cursed under his breath and keyed in the override. You'd better be right. Jamie moved faster than thought, her fingers a blur across the console. She wasn't just hacking the Council's fleet. She was teaching it. She fed the system a constant stream of evolving battle data, forcing it to rewrite its tactics every second, ensuring that the enemy could never lock onto a pattern. She turned the fleet into something as chaotic as humanity itself, something that no cold, calculated intelligence could predict. The enemy faltered. Jamie seized the moment. Redirect all firepower to their central flagship. Overload their command link. The fleet obeyed. The Council's warships, now operating under human ingenuity, concentrated everything on a single point. The enemy's neural network buckled under the assault, unable to keep up with the ever-changing patterns. Their coordination broke. One by one, the enemy ships fell. The battle was won. Jamie slumped against the console, exhaling slowly. The bridge was silent, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on everyone present. Jerahul turned to her, his expression unreadable. You just saved the galaxy. Jamie let out a dry chuckle. Yeah, you're welcome. Larax shifted uneasily. This war, it never truly ended, did it? Jamie shook her head. No, and it won't. Not until they're gone for good. She pushed off the console, stretching her arms. So, who's buying the first round? Jerahul blinked. Then, to everyone's surprise, he let out a low, rumbling laugh. The war wasn't over. But for now, they had won.